Hello and welcome to the third session of day 3 of IFMA Tech Week 2026. I'm Colette Temick with Core Therma. I'm also the co-chair of the IT community of IFMA. Tech Week 2026 is presented by Schneider Electric, and today's session is entitled Ground Truth: Why Every Actionable Plan Starts with a Digital Floor Walk. And we'll explore how AkitaBox transforms facility management from guesswork into strategy through this progressive approach to data-driven decision making. There are resources available for you in the resource section of this webinar. We are recording for future access, so people can watch it again as they please. But it's my pleasure to introduce Josh Lowe, co-founder and chief solutions officer of AkitaBox. Josh has over 20 years of experience in facility management and is passionate about helping building management professionals make these data decisions with impacts to operational efficiency and success. So you have been in this area of our industry for quite some time. So let's jump into the conversation.
Awesome. Thanks so much for the introduction and really happy to be here for Tech Week. I'm going to go ahead and start sharing the presentation here. All right, let's get going. So I talk to a lot of owners. I talk to a lot of people who own a lot of square footage and a lot of people who work and consult for those people. It's really interesting to me every single time when you walk into a building and you're like, hey, do you have an asset list? And they go, yeah, I think we do. And they go and look for it and they might find something. It might be in Excel, it might be in a CMMS, it might be a report from a condition assessment they had done 4 years ago that's dusty on a binder behind them because it's so aged out that it's not really adding any value anymore. And if that sounds familiar, it's because you're not alone. We see this all the time. Now, varying degrees. However, I've never and can tell you ever walked into a client or prospective client's office and said, "Do you have an asset registry and how good do you think it is?" I've never had somebody hand me one and say it's 100% accurate. There's always some unknown. And what I really want to talk about today is how the first thing anybody should do, and if you haven't done it, no time better than the present, pause and go figure out what you have. Because every actionable plan should start with a floor walk. Go walk what you have. So, this is that question. Do you actually know what you own? And 9 times out of 10, there's gaps. And when there's gaps, that's risk. You can't manage well to the surprises that are lying underneath the surface. Most teams that we walk into are in firefighting mode. You see this all the time. I don't have time to slow down because something's always breaking. We never have enough money. Our deferred maintenance is rising. And so when 50% of maintenance gets spent on reactive, that's not proactive planning. That's the building managing us, right? That's the firefighting mode getting thrust upon us in a way that doesn't allow us to slow down and create a plan. And I'm not saying that that plan is always going to be, sunshines, rainbows, and roses. There's going to be hard decisions that need to be made. There's probably not going to be enough money, but the good news is that once you've started with that groundwork, you know what you have. You can actually start to create an actionable plan to pull yourself out of the hole, or at least be in the hole together with the CFO, CEO, and everybody else, because we tend to be, with that lack of data, always in emergency mode. And so the data we do have becomes untrusted, and the stuff that we have now is even worse than maybe having half the data. If half the data we have isn't trusted because of all the surprises that pop up, we're starting on the wrong foot and we're actually building a trust issue in the wrong direction. With that said, I'd like to start this off with a little bit of a poll so that we can understand where people are at, right? This is the question that we ask all the time. This actually starts to help us decide what the best strategy is for the client walking in, as far as, are you going to start from scratch? Is it worth using some things? I mean, even if you have a partial data list, if that partial data list is connected to historical costs or historical work orders in some way that we can pull that data through in a meaningful way, there may still be some value there. Let's not throw everything out with the bathwater, right? And so trying to understand what your baseline is, do we trust our data? We're very confident. Yeah, we're kind of confident. That's that kind of mixed list, right? Of, yeah, we're confident in the stuff that we have, but we know we don't have everything. Most people we walk into is more in that, not really. We used to, but we haven't really come back to it in years. Um, Interesting. The group here joining, right, 57% is in that not really. That is what we see out in the field. And we see very few varies. So thanks for participating. That aligns very much with what we're seeing and reinforces what I'm about to show you and what we're going to talk about today. So this is public sector data. I can tell you from our conversations, private sector is not far behind this, and in some cases could be worse in some industries. The backlog is growing at an exponential rate. According to data, it's doubled since 2017. That deferred maintenance across state, local, and public buildings right now is $100 billion. And that gap that I continue to talk about, the things that you don't know, the underlying risk lying under the surface because you haven't found it, tracked it, logged it, that costs you 3 to 5 times more every time one of those whoopsies pops up. That 3 to 5 times cost, because we're in reactive versus proactive and planning mode, that's your hope, right? We never get enough money, but part of not getting enough money is because we're spending 5 times the cost in reactive mode. So how do we start to understand this, know it? Okay, so now we know the facts. It's getting worse. It's getting worse because we're not managing to what we own because we have data gaps. Here's the other thing we see. Spreadsheets are everyone's favorite. I'll call it easy record. If you don't have software, you typically default to a spreadsheet, at least today. It used to be maybe clipboards and binders and things like that, but today it's a spreadsheet. And we all know those people and have worked with those people who are spreadsheet wizards and can bring data in and make a spreadsheet do pretty amazing things. But how that spreadsheet works, how you update it, how we actually utilize that data isn't really in the spreadsheet. It's with the person who created it. And they become so complex and interweave that really only the creator knows how to manipulate it. Not that that's a bad thing. If that person's going to be around and they're never going to leave, but in a lot of cases, those people at some point retire, maybe get another job. That spreadsheet is still stuck around and somebody's trying to use it for as long as possible until it breaks beyond control. And what we actually find is even in the good spreadsheets, 88% of them contain errors. And spreadsheets are really hard to audit and update because they're just lines of data that in a facility world, where are they? How do I audit that? How do I go back and earn the trust of that? Maybe it was good data at one time and it even had room numbers associated with it. But we went through a room renumbering plan and that never got brought back to the record. And so now it's really hard to connect the dots on what was the old room number and what's the new room number and can I actually make those things work? It starts to compound. And every time we create one of those gaps or those newly created issues in our data, it only compounds between data sets because none of us, at least most of our clients before they talk to us, aren't using a single data source. They don't have a source of truth. They're working from multiple points, and sometimes those points are overlapping, and sometimes those efforts are overlapping in order to keep that data clean and up to date. And so why are we talking today? I want everybody who answered that poll question and doesn't have data to go do a validation walk. Maybe you have a lot of square feet. Maybe that's going to take a lot of time. Nick and I, one of my coworkers, we do a podcast, and one of the things that we were talking about last week was the fact that 75% of facility managers manage under 1 million square feet. When we're talking about data gaps and capturing this, at least for that 75% who are managing around 1 million, maybe a little more, that's really fairly easy to kind of hit the pause button and go capture the data. Now, having a good tool helps, and we'll talk about some ways that AkitaBox helps our customers with their tools and as far as making it very efficient, very accurate, and allowing you to come back and have an audit trail that you can come back and validate later. And so having the right tools so you can go out in the field, walk around, take photos, have them on a floor plan and mapped, geo-referenced, right? So that when we go back and we may have mistrust or somebody says, hey, what is that thing and where is it? We can pull up the map, the earth, and show them where it is, what floor it's on, what room it's in, what space it's on, if it's connected to things. Again, how much data you get and how interconnected you create it depends on the quality of data you're starting with, but everybody can get there. And we can eat the elephant one bite at a time, so to speak, and everybody can start today. And eventually we'll have what we need as long as we're putting it in a system where we can maintain that inventory and ultimately capture the condition. Knowing what you have, knowing where it is, knowing what it costs to replace it, knowing the condition that it's in, there's some other factors that we can add in along the way, maybe some risk factors, things like that. But ultimately, all of that compounds so that we can start making actionable decisions based upon validated data in the field, transparency and defensibility to that data. So when we bring up a cost and the CFO says, which elevator is that you're telling me to replace? They all were good to me. You can show them, you can show the pictures, you can dig into all the things that we need to dig into, and we start building trust in the right direction because every time a question gets asked, we can ground truth that, we can pull it up on a map, we can show where it is, we can show the photos, we can show the condition. Now we can have a good conversation about the condition. Great. You don't think that's poor, you think it's fair, you think that's failing. Let's have a conversation and make that together. But now we're starting to create that buildable plan, that scalable thing for our business that helps us to stop spending the 3 to 5 times on the surprises because we can start to see those surprises coming before they get here. So let's talk about walking. This is AkitaBox. What we help our clients do is capture data. We do it better than anybody else. You can take your phone out in the field, you can snap pictures, you can upload those photos into the pin that's on the floor plan that shows you where you're at. It will actually identify that, it will name it, it will classify it, it will bring in things like volts, amps, phases, depending on the data you're looking for. It will actually go and find that data and fill it in for you. You still have to go give it a condition and a few other things. AI's not the best, at least at a lot of equipment yet, at doing that. It can do some superficial things, but a lot of stuff's hidden behind panels and boxes and things like that. And the box could look really bad, but it could be really good inside. So little human in the loop here is always good because you know your facilities better than anybody else. And so being able to be that person out there with the photos, updating this, and then, hey, when I go do a work order on this, maybe the condition's worse off than it was before, and I update that as part of my workflow through my work order process. It starts to keep this data fresh all the time versus what's happened in the past through condition assessment processes, which is let's go get the data, let's bring it in, and all of a sudden it's bad in 3 to 5 years and we're spending money all over to do it all over again. That goes to interactive floor plan. So now everything's on the earth. Everything's in a property, it's on a building, it's in a space. We can bring that up. We can see everything that's inside of that from an asset point of view. We have different floor plan layers you can turn on and off. I can start to see all the data about that asset, including its condition, its make, model, manufacturer number, and costs. Those costs can be the PM, what should we be spending every year and when should we go do it, to what's that full unit replacement cost looks like that we need to start planning for in the future. We see this all the time. Now you see the value of being able to go there, open up that asset. Somebody asks you a question, you're like, here's all the information. Here were the photos that were taken last. Here's what the condition is. Here's all the other things that you might need for any other action that you need to take against that, including calling a contractor and giving them the information to come work on it, maintain it, or possibly actually pull the trigger on that replacement before it becomes an emergency. But when we start to find that we expected to find 500 assets and we found 2,500 assets, this is where those gaps in that risk starts to come in. That extra 2,000 assets, now they might be small, they might be things that I would have never put in my CMMS tool before. I still need to plan for the cost of those. I still need to get those in the budget. We still need to do the things to the little things that all adds up. And so having a system that has everything in it as a source of truth at a single source is really the value that we're talking about. So from a floor plan to an actionable plan, how do we get from that field walk to that condition index to the capital plan that we need to go and put together once a year and actually defend it? We know that we can get 12 to 18% lower maintenance cost when we have a proactive plan versus a run to failure plan. This is also where some analysis can take place because some things with labor costs rising and parts rising and all the things that have to happen to PM, there may become strategies where you start to say, actually, because of the yearly labor to PM that asset, it's actually cheaper and more effective to have a couple of them on the shelf and actually run a true run to failure plan, not a failed PM plan that turns into a run to fail plan, but an actual planned run to fail plan because it's more economical. Other cases on big equipment, absolutely not. You should do the PMs, your HVAC, right? Filter changes. You can't let a filter go beyond. You're going to ruin your HVAC unit. You're going to get poor efficiencies, all the other thing compounding. So there's strategies we can deploy, but we can only really start to deploy those strategies once we fill the gap, once we've narrowed that down and we know exactly what we're managing to. Here's where we start to connect the dots. All of that stuff that we went and collected, all of that really good quality data that's ground truthed, we now have the cost behind it. We now know the condition, we know the risk. You can put whatever other priority factors in there that you want in order to slice and dice this in a capital plan so that we can start to come into the system and say, hey, look, we just costed this. I know what this is in today's cost, and now we can bring it in and start doing scenario planning. We can do this as a team. I'm actually going to pull this back here and pause it for a second. We can start to pull levers. What is our current budget? What is our current backlog? What is our inflation? And the backlog can be fed directly from the data, and that's what we're actually managing to. How far ahead do I want to look? We can bring all this to the forefront and start pulling those together so that as we come through this, I can start to see what effect does that have if we increase our budget year over year. Can I actually start to get this deferred backlog to flatline? That's our goal, right? This rising curve. I mean, unless we're planning for obsolescence at some point, and maybe we are. I mean, there's scenarios with our higher ed clients where they're trying to get the last bits of value out of that building before they tear it down. And this is a perfectly good strategy. But for those that are trying to run these buildings for the longevity and not have to tear them down, we need to get that line going down. And so is it increasing our budgets? Is it decreasing the number of buildings we actually maintain so our budget goes farther? Trying to understand those things and have a plan is really where it's at and how we start to bring that long-term value to all the clients that we serve. I need to stress this because everybody wants AI at a conference this week. All we're talking about is AI. Every title of everything that we're talking about has AI in it. And most people are dealing with bad data. This is why 80% of projects fail. We know that. We know that people jump into AI and they say, oh, AI is smart. It'll fix what I give it. It doesn't know what it doesn't know. AI will only utilize the data that we can feed it. And so feeding it partial data isn't going to help you get better results. It's actually going to get you the wrong answer faster. So making sure that you don't become one of the firms that gets all excited, and maybe you even have executive leadership who's behind it, jumping into the AI bandwagon, and you're feeding it. I mean, we saw the poll earlier, your unsure data, we're going to end up with unsure results pretty quickly, and it's going to scale those wrong answers. We need to understand, if we want AI to help us, and it can, huge potential, it needs to have good data, and all of the data, not just some of the data. It needs all of the data so that it can make the best decisions in how it guides us and becomes in that loop with the human to help them analyze our data better, maybe to mass update and keep it up to date better. It is here to help us as a tool, but knowing the fuel that tool runs on to give us the good information, which is all of the data, not just some of it, is very important. It makes what I'm talking about from the standpoint of ground truth even more important now than it was before. It's no longer nice to have. It's no longer a really cool thing. It no longer is something that helps me. It's now mandatory. If you're going to use AI tools to help you manage your facilities and become smarter and dig yourself out of the hole that you're in from a backlog standpoint, you absolutely need to have all of your data. And that's where this really comes into play and helps out. Now, this can feed other systems. It can become that thing in the middle, but you have to get that ground truth and you have to have that source of truth you can update and maintain that feeds all those other things. Let's talk about another poll. What's the biggest barrier between you and a trustworthy asset inventory? What I just showed of taking your phone out in the field, walking around, taking the photos, having it create an asset, having it create a cost, giving it a condition, it's not that onerous. It does take time. I don't want to discredit that. Going up on roofs, getting down in the dungeons, right? That absolutely takes time. But is time the issue? Is it the staff, right? Is it that you don't have a system to put this into? We already discussed, we don't really trust our current data. So let's go get some new data. Let's get fresh data. It's not that hard. And it really doesn't take that long. And if you don't know where to start, there's lots of people to help you. Give us a call. We have lots of consultants that we know from the AEC industry that go out and perform condition assessments to help people get going who use our tool to collect that data and deliver those services. And so, yeah, if time and staff and not having a system are your issues, maybe you need a jump start. Maybe you need somebody to come in and help you do that. And having a plan and having a system for it to go to is going to be the most important thing for you. Let's talk about AkitaBox for a second and what we're really talking about in terms of getting a ground truth and going out. AkitaBox is floor plan centric. You saw it in the things. Now, if you don't have a floor plan, that's okay. It's also GIS. It does coordinate systems, so you can pin your approximate location. You can give it a floor level, so you can still filter by what floors things are on. That's okay. But the goal is that we're collecting location-based data in a location-based way so that we can defend it, we can go back and audit it, and we always have that defensibility and transparency behind it. Getting that through ground truth capture, walking around with a phone, having that backup photo, being able to see all those things is critical. That's how we get to data that we can trust. When we can walk into a board meeting, when we can walk into the CFO's office and have them ask us any question about any line item or anything on that plan, and us be able to quickly pull up photos, backup information, potentially if you've had it, cost information about that operational cost. If it's tied to work orders and we can pull that through, we can pull operational costs up. So now we can start to say, how much are you spending every year? How much is it worth? At some point, condition may not even be a factor. We might have just spent 60% of the replacement cost of that asset in the last 12 months. I don't care what the condition is. That should probably be an automatic trigger for replacement. Those are the types of things that we can start to look at the data to slice and dice that for our capital plan and AI costing. So being able to bring all that data forward, including operational data if it's available, so that we can start to analyze what assets are a priority, where they fall in the timeline, what's their useful life, are we adjusting the useful life? We all know we can manage some things longer than others, and some things we're not getting that life out of. And so being able to adjust that on the fly so we can see the impacts of actually we're finding VFDs are going a little longer than 8, we're going to put them for 12. Cool. We're down in Florida near the saltwater. We're actually seeing the opposite. We're seeing them go from 8 to 4. Okay, those are site specific things that we want to make sure that we can adjust for so our plan will reflect what's happening on the ground. And then ultimately, all the tools that we're showing you is purpose built for FM. These are not things, it's not a strategy we thought of after the fact. It is really built on a platform of location based intelligence from an asset level, open API, and then being able to feed that data anywhere you want. Some people have a CMMS system they love. Great. The data should be able to flow there in a meaningful way. Let's get all the value out of that system, not just partial value because you don't have it populated. People may have other things. They might have ERPs. They might have things that manage vendors. Great. Let's just make sure those databases are up to date so that we don't have the surprises that are coming in and we can manage to those things. So AkitaBox is really here to be your all-in-one solution. We have CMMS tools, we have inspection tools, we have a whole bunch of other things that once you get that ground truth and we have that data we can trust for our plan, now let's manage it. Those things are in the loop too, but we also recognize that not everybody can or is willing to change systems. And so how we integrate with those, how we work inside of those parameters to still bring the most value to you and your organization is really important to us. What's your next step? Start with a floor walk. However, make sure you have a plan. Having a system for that data to walk into. An app helps. Having it standardized, making sure that when you're going out and collecting it, it's being done in a way that isn't creating another data mess. So having things like drop downs to help normalize data from types to refrigerants to whatever else you may need to analyze on, having that built into the data structure is really important. And we have some standards that really help make that easy. But having that system so that you can actually make sure that the data you're collecting can be utilized in the future by things like AI. It needs consistent naming conventions. And then let's start turning that into a plan, whether it's a capital plan, whether it's influencing your current operational workflows to make sure that you're not having those surprises. That's great. So with that, only have 2 minutes left. Probably time for maybe one question,
Yeah.
although I think I lost my chat. So
So Josh, let me help you. I guess one of the common themes of questions, and we will respond, we'll collect the questions and obviously provide the audience with a response and where to find that after today's session. But one of them is, how do they access the tool, and is there an opportunity to, is there a trial period, or what's the process?
Yeah, absolutely. It's really easy to access the tool. It's a native app on your iOS or Android tablet. You can also access it via the web. We are a web platform. As far as getting a trial or something like that set up, happy to have that conversations. We do things like that all the time, and we'd be happy to have a demo and set that up for you.
And then the follow-up question is really, how long does it take to get the mobile app and the platform set up to enable an organization to actually do the walkthrough?
Yeah, I mean, to get to a point of doing a walkthrough, it can be as quick as a week and as long as 3 months. It depends on how complex and what data structures we're walking into. But assuming it's a pretty simple one, it's pretty quick to get you up and running and collecting data.
Terrific. Well, Josh, I can't thank you enough. I think you brought some really important points, right? Especially as facility managers, and we've all lived through and experienced this where you're trying to gather the asset list, but more importantly, you feel you may have a good list, but then there are a whole host of other assets out there that you haven't captured. And then you're missing the economies of scale when you're actually doing the maintenance, when you're on site, and there's such an opportunity there with your tools. So thank you. Really appreciate it. And appreciate everyone joining us today, and look forward to seeing you during our next FM Tech Week session, which is tomorrow, 9 a.m. Pacific, 12 Eastern. and the session is titled Beyond Occupancy, Reimagining the Office for the Future of Hybrid Work. And Free Space will be joining us for that discussion. So thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.
Thank you
Have a
so
great
much.
rest of the day.